about ready to get going here. So I think everybody knows me, but for anyone online watching later, my name is Camille. I've been with Chenard's for the last 5 years, and I am the resident beekeeper here. So I'm going to teach you today how to extract your honey, how to get the bees out of your honey frames, and just safely go through the process to get the most honey possible. So this is a pretty quick class, but I've got it in a couple of sections. It's important to know when to extract. If you extract too early, your honey goes bad. If you extract too late, your bees start to starve. So timing is pretty important when it comes to extracting honey. How to tell if a frame is ready, using your super and evacuating the bees from that super. Extraction tools that you'll need, the setup for your honey extracting room, and of course the cleanup, which is probably something everyone's interested in. It's very difficult to clean up wax. So there's a couple different types of extraction. We're going to cover mostly centrifugal extraction with a honey spinet. But you can also do a gravity drain for those of you who only have a frame or two of honey. Gravity drains are great. It's really inexpensive. All you really need is a cookie sheet and uncapping scratcher. You can even use a fork. So super, super inexpensive, but it can take a couple of days, and ants can be a concern. Cut comb is another type of extraction, but it takes a lot more timing than most extraction. Cut comb must be on specific foundation, either foundationless frames or very thin real wax with no wires. It's great for showing off intact honeycomb. It's very difficult to fake. Honey is one of the top 3 most faked foods in the country, I think in the world actually. So cut comb honey is very difficult to fake. So if you're concerned about it at all, showing off your cut comb honey, no one's going to doubt you it's real honey. Downside to this is you can't use frames with plastic foundation. Nobody wants to eat plastic, doesn't look very good. You're essentially taking the comb and you're using a cookie cutter and throwing it in jars, and that's all it is. Multiple harvests are pretty important with cut comb. As soon as that honey is capped, you want to be harvesting it, and you want to be using different frames every single year because you want nice, white, fresh wax. If you've got dark wax that's a couple of years old, no one's really going to want to eat that because it's just full of all sorts of foot traffic from honeybees, whatever they happen to bring in. So you really want nice, fresh, white comb. So you're replacing your combs every single year. Flow hive harvesting can be very simple, and it can be a little bit more complicated than you think. It can be harvested throughout honey flow in small amounts, but it does require inspection. You can't just turn the key and go, great, there's honey, because if it's uncapped, it's not cured, it could go bad. So it's important to actually take those frames, take a look at them. Hey, are these capped? Are these ready to actually harvest? So it's not quite as cut and dry as they make it look in the videos. It's definitely easy enough for a child to do. Once the beekeeper goes in, realizes everything's ready to go ahead and take the kid to the back, have them turn the key, and there you go, honey comes out. So it's really fun, but it does take a little bit extra work. And the honeybees don't readily accept those frames, so you've got to be prepared to rub some wax on the frames, to spray some sugar syrup on the frames, get those bees interested in those special frames if you're going to be doing flow hive harvesting. Using a centrifuge, though, great for really large harvests, makes it go really quick. Plastic foundation is highly recommended. It's easy to have a blowout if you're using real wax foundation. I've actually had that happen before, and it's a huge mess, and you don't want to clean that up. So just take it from me, do plastic, please. The equipment is very expensive, but rentals can be found. We do offer a rental on our 6-frame hand crank extractor. It's $50 for 2 business days, so that gives you plenty of time to harvest. So when should you be extracting? Most beekeepers extract all at once at the end of summer. It's a lot of work, so it's nice to do it all in one day versus having to clean the extractor 3 or 4 times a season. I always extract my honey the last week of July, but a lot of people have different time constraints. So it is possible to realize your honey is ready, take your honey supers off and store them until you're ready to extract. That's fine too.
How do you store them?
So we'll get into storage a little bit later, but it's usually pretty simple. If you're harvesting a specific type of honey, extraction needs to occur at the end of the bloom cycle. So let's say you have your hives moving around throughout the season on different crops. If you have them moved over to clover, you'll want to extract as soon as you move them off of the clover so that you get that specific honey varietal. Um, So the reason why I extract last week of July is I want to get the most honey possible out of my hives. I want to make sure it's all capped and ready to go. And I also want to harvest with enough time for one, the bees to start building their honey back up for winter, and two, so that I can put 2 mite treatments on in fall and get sugar feeding on if I am uncomfortable with the amount of harvest they're bringing in. So it gives me a little bit of time to take care of the hive after I've extracted from them. The latest honey extractions should be done by the end of August. That'll still give your bees enough time to restock before winter, but it's going to put the pinch on your mite treatments. So a little bit earlier is better, but every year is very different. So keep up your inspections, keep taking a look at your honey supers, making sure you're seeing when they are capped and ready to go. Sometimes the bees don't cap until first week of August. Sometimes they cap early. So keep an eye on it. And last week of July is just kind of my go-to. It's one week or the other in either direction usually. How to tell if a frame is ready. So all 3 of the frames you see at the top here are ready to harvest. You see these nice white cappings over the top. Some cappings may be what we call dry cappings. Some cappings may be what we call wet cappings. The wet cappings are just touching the honey so you can actually kind of see the liquid in there. The dry cappings, like in this first photo over here, the honey may not be completely full, and so the wax capping isn't actually touching the honey. Still perfectly ripe and ready to go, beautiful frame. All of these are wonderful to extract.
Even the one that's not fully capped.
They are all fully capped. You've got a teeny little bit down here, but there's actually a way of getting around that. That's what's called the shake test. So if you take a frame out and you realize, oh, there's a tiny little strip at the bottom that's not capped, but everything else on the frame is, maybe they just haven't gotten to capping it yet. So you take the frame and you lean it over on its side so that some of the cells are facing completely down, and you shake it a couple of times. If no liquid comes out, it's dense enough to be honey and it won't spoil your batch. If you have a bunch of liquid coming out, keep shaking until the liquid stops coming out, and then you've gotten rid of all the honey that'll ruin your batch.
And where are you shaking it?
Just onto a little sheet, onto
Okay.
whatever you're carrying. Not back into the hive. We're getting kind of concerned about robbing at this point. Hives are full of honey, resources are going away in the heat wave, so you don't want to get a bunch of loose honey in the hive or around the hive to attract predators and things. So shake it onto something you're going to carry away from the hive. Went over shake test here. You can use a refractometer as well. They're expensive, but they're fun little toys. It basically tells you what the moisture content of your honey is. 18% moisture or below is ideal. I think you can get usually anywhere from 12 to 18% moisture content. Nectar will start out 80 to 90% water. So if you have a high moisture content, there's a higher likelihood that your honey will actually go rancid. So you want to make sure that it's nice and thick and it will be shelf stable. Removing your super. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. I have my favorite way. It's not necessarily the best way. It's just the way that I like to do it. It's quick, it's easy. It does not harm the bees.
Must have been a hot day for that last picture.
Actually, this is the extraction process for the bees. This is not normal bearding. This is chemical bearding. So I have a fume board on here. It has a solar panel on top, so it heats very quickly, and it has foam on the bottom here, which you spray your Fisher's Bee Quick onto. This doesn't smell too good to us, but the bees despise the smell. It doesn't actually harm the bees unless you spray it continually directly on the bee. I've tested it before, and well, does it harm the bees? Does it actually do anything? Does it reduce brood laying? And I have not found any harm done to the bees using this method.
So if you spray this and that's on top.
Mhm.
They'll all just come out of the hive and do it
Yep.
like that?
They despise the smell, and the heat makes the smell kind of permeate through that honey super. So they're going to just ditch that honey super. It takes about 10 minutes on a really hot day, and then you lift the super off, and there's no bees in there at all. There may be 3 or 4 left, and they're all going to beard on the front and go, "Pu." So it's very fast. If you don't have a lot of time, if you don't want to use a skateboard overnight, this is a really cool method. I use this one every year. So a lot of beekeepers do have extra entrance holes in honey supers so that foraging bees can return directly to the honey super instead of having to go through the bottom brood box and all the way up to deposit their honey. It's really important to have wine corks on hand because if you put a bee escape on your box and you leave it overnight and you accidentally forget to put that plug in, you're still going to have bees the next morning. And what's worse, they realize that they can't go back and forth, so they're going to rob all the honey out and you're not going to get any. Make sure that entrance is plugged.
So where is that extra?
The extra entrance does not exist on every honey super. A lot of beekeepers will drill, I think it's a 1.5-inch hole, basically just the size of a wine cork, into the honey super near the handle. But they don't usually come that way. It's something that the beekeepers will drill on there.
And that's just so that bees can go right into the soup.
Yep. And there are extra shims for entrances too, like the medication shim that you use for Apiguard. That could be something else that you use. Make sure you remove that. You don't want them to be able to get back into the honey super if you're trying to get rid of the bees. So a couple of tools, wine cork, like I mentioned. It's good to have a bee brush on hand. I despise bee brushes. They don't like it. But during honey harvest, this is the time that I'll actually use the bee brush. It's useful because you want to get all the rest of the bees off. You don't want to harm the bees. If you use a really soft bristle brush, it's much better than the plastic ones. The plastic ones can harm the bees and really make them angry. The soft ones will gently brush them off. They're more expensive, but in my opinion, it's worth it.
Would you, you're gonna talk about smoke.
Yep, definitely getting there. So it's good to have an extra super or a nuke box on hand. It's a lot of work getting that honey super off. It's very heavy. If you've got a 10-frame honey super on there, it can easily be 100 pounds. So having an extra box up there, if you've got a nuke box that holds 5 frames, so you're splitting the weight in half that you have to move back and forth. Have a smoker on hand. You shouldn't really need the smoker when you're evacuating bees, especially if you're using the fumigation method. It's as simple as saying hi to the bees, your normal smoke the exterior kind of deal. You remove the lid, you put the fumigation super on there, and you walk away. Definitely be suited up, definitely be safe, but you really should not need very much smoke for this. Some beekeepers say that the smoke actually flavors the honey, so you want to use minimal amounts of smoke unless you're starting to rile the bees up, in which case it's good to have it on hand and lit. Have a wagon around. Supers are heavy, and the main reason beekeepers get out of beekeeping is because they throw out their back, they hurt their back to the point they can't do it anymore. So whenever possible, use an aid in lifting, have a wagon handy, have an extra nuke box ready so you can split the weight load in half. Just be really kind to your back because that is the #1 reason that beekeepers stop beekeeping is back problems. You must have a very warm, very bee-proof room. Garages are great. Kitchen works, but I would not recommend it because it's going to be a gigantic mess and it's going to be a huge cleanup. I don't really care if there's a little bit of wax on my garage floor. I'm okay with that. But if you have a tiny crack in your garage, you're like, oh, it's too warm in here, you pop it open a few inches, you're gonna have a couple thousand bees coming in for you. That honey is very, very strongly scented, and honeybees from miles away from your own hive and from other hives are going to smell that and they're gonna want to get in. So you've got to have a bee-proof room for honey extraction. Mess prevention, not really much you can do. It's going to be a mess no matter what you do. The best mess prevention that I have found is a painter's drop cloth. So the same cloth that you use when you're capturing a swarm to make sure you get all the bees, you can use that for honey extraction as well. Still going to be a huge mess, but if you're only using it for honey extraction, it's not that big of a deal.
What if all you have is your kitchen? You don't have an extra room, that's.
If all you have is your kitchen, definitely use the painter's drop cloth. Be as careful as you can be, but it's going to be a mess. Pitcher plants are wonderful if you have ant problems afterwards. All right. So removing the super, we talked about this a little bit, but getting into it a little more detail. So your super is full of honey and very protective bees. They've got a lot of honey in there. That is their winter survival. They've collected way more than they need, but they're still going to be very protective of it. So make sure that you're completely suited up, make sure that you're completely safe. It's easier to anger the bees this time of year. So just move slow, don't make any sudden movements. Fumigation is my preferred method. And we talked a bit about the fumigation board. It's got a solar top and a felt bottom. The felt bottom is wetted generously with a fumigant. I use Fisher's Bee Quick. The solar panel will be very hot. The bees move away into a super below or a brood box below the super. Usually takes about 10 minutes if you have it in the sun. Move and seal your evacuated bees ASAP. It does not take long for bees to re-enter once the fume board is off. So take that super, immediately get it into your bee proof. You'll have a couple of stragglers left, so you can just flick them off gently with a gloved hand or use your bee brush for this. Okay, let's go over bee escape boards now. They come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. I usually use the full board right here. It's just an entire board that encapsulates the whole hive. They can be as simple as a tiny little plastic piece that you put over the hole on your inner cover. So an inner cover can be turned into a bee escape. You can use a standalone bee escape. There's a whole bunch of different designs and styles of them. So they don't harm the bees, they don't use any chemicals, it's just a physical method of removal. Again, make sure you use a cork to seal any entryways into the honey super, but this method is quite a bit slower than your fumigation method. Fumigation takes roughly 10 minutes. This is going to take several hours or overnight. So it's extremely important that you have these boxes completely sealed off. Robbers cannot get in. Sometimes when you use your hive tool to open up a box, you make a little nick in it. If that nick is big enough for a bee to get through, that's all it takes. So if you're worried about there being tiny cracks in it that the bee could get through, just put a little bit of tape over that in the meantime. Do not let any bees get in here during the removal process.
So how is this skateboard helping to empty it?
So the cool thing about the skateboard here. So this is the front side here. And it's really easy for honeybees to get through the large entrance at the top. And then they'll work their way through the maze and exit. But it's really hard for them to find these 3 tiny exits on the side. So if your honey super is up here, it's easy for them to filter down into the brood boxes, but they can't get back into the honey super through this maze.
Oh, so this is going between the deep and the
Yes.
super.
So essentially you're removing your queen excluder and putting this in its place. You're probably going to wind up with a couple of extra bees in here, more bees than you would have with your fumigation. Because the bees are just going down at their leisure, you're going to have a few more in there once you take that super off. So bee brush becomes a lot more important when you're using this method.
So they're going down in here just to get out of the hive.
Yep.
And go forage.
So naturally, when foragers come up and deposit their honey into the honey super, they don't have anything left to do. They're strictly foragers. They have other bees at other ages that are stirring the honey, they're capping the honey. The forager is going to deposit their honey and immediately leave the hive for another load.
But what about those other workers that are stirring the honey?
They will take a little bit more time. But if everything's capped up there, like it should be, they don't really have anything to do. It's just a bunch of filled storage, so they're going to be working elsewhere in the hive.
Does it help to put an empty super under your super so that You're going in there instead.
I never really have. I always have a couple of empty frames below those boxes anyhow, so they'll have room to go. Removing your super tips and tricks. Talked about this at length already. Honey supers are heavy. Have an extra box on hand. Have extra helpers with you. Um, just don't hurt your back. Bees want to re-enter their supers quickly, especially if there are no bees in there. Like, oh, this is honey. This is unprotected. I need to get in there and either rob it out or protect it from other bees. Um, So if you've got a honey super that's completely empty of bees and you want to get a second one that's completely empty of bees and throw them on your wagon all at once, you can do that, but make sure that you cover them in the meantime, because you'll wind up just getting bees coming all over the place trying to get into those supers. So throw an extra telescoping top on top, throw a t-shirt, a bee escape, something on that box while you're getting the other box onto your wagon.
Do you need to keep those frames in a vertical position when you're taking them out?
It's easiest to do that, but not necessarily.
Like if you had a plastic box and you could just.
If you're putting them into a tote or something, it's fine to stack them however you want. Just be careful that you don't pop any of those honey cells, because it's going to create a mess and that's going to basically take away from your honey harvest. So just gently set them. You can set them on their sides, you can set them up top, as long as you don't break those cells. There's still bees in my extraction room. This is absolutely going to happen. I like to have just a veil without a jacket or anything, just a standalone veil on while I do the extraction. But once you're in the extraction room, you're away from the hive. They're not really concerned about stinging you. They're more concerned about getting out of the garage or getting the honey. But if you have a light on in your garage, they're attracted to the light just like a moth, and they'll all wind up on your lights. One year I had quite a few of them that did not make it out of the honey super. So what I did is I just had a couple of hooks around my light. I threw a light net on that, around the light. So they were all bouncing off the net trying to get to the light. Once I figured I got most of them up there, I let the hooks down, gathered them all up, tossed them outside. So if you don't want to kill all the bees that are in the garage with you, the net method will work too. Takes a little while to set it up. You gotta put hooks in the garage. It's kind of silly, but it does work. I have never actually felt like they wanted to sting me while I'm doing extraction. It's possible if you smack them, if they're on the frame when you lift it out, yes, they're going to sting you, but they're not after you in the extraction room. So just a veil I'm usually very comfortable with.
Is there a way to make sure you don't have any bees when you go into your extraction?
The bee brush and just looking at each individual frame. So once you move your honey super from your hive all the way over to your bee safe room, right before you enter the bee safe room, you can take each frame out, put it into a different box, and inspect each frame and make sure you don't have any bees. And it is possible to get 0 bees in the room with you, but usually there's 1 or 2 that sneak by. So getting into the actual extraction. Supers are off the hive, they're all in your room. Now what? You've got all of this honey in all of these frames, and how do you get them out? So you're in your bee-proof room. Bees will smell honey from a very long ways out. So they're going to be trying to get into your bee-safe room. It's good to have an extra door. So if you have your bee-safe room in the garage, try not to enter out the large garage door or the man door, go into the house if you're going to exit. You might get a couple of bees in there, but if it's truly bee safe, it's not a huge concern. You're going to need your bee-proof room, your centrifuge or honey spinner, an uncapping tub as well. Not a great picture of it here, but we do have the uncapping tub over there on the table right there. It's good to have a honey bucket with a gate or a couple of them, depending on how many supers you're extracting. The honey gate takes a little bit to get used to. You will absolutely spill at first, but you'll get used to how this works and how often you should be cutting it off. I've gotten to the point where I basically spill 1 or 2 drops if I'm harvesting several gallons of honey. Definitely have a filter or a sieve on hand. There's a lot of different sieves out there. They all work pretty well. They're all difficult to clean. So you can use plastic, you can use mesh, you can use metal. The range you're looking for is anywhere from 200 to 600 microns. So the really big, thick filters should be on top. That's to filter out any dead bees, any large wax debris, that sort of thing. As you get down towards the bottom, you're filtering out little bits of pollen, little tiny bits of wax, that sort of thing. You're working on getting very, very pure liquid honey with your 200 micron filter, or sorry, 600 micron filter. Uncapping knife is absolutely necessary to have. There's a couple different kinds out there. You can have a cold uncapping knife, which it is literally just a knife. It's good to have a nice hot bucket of water around. You soak it in a hot bucket of water, it gets nice and warm, and you're able to easily slice through the comb to uncap. Electric hot knives are absolutely wonderful. Once you use them, you'll never really go back. Takes a little while for it to reheat in between uncapping frames. So if you're just racing through frames, it's going to get a little bit difficult to uncap. Slow down for 2 or 3 minutes, it'll reheat and you can continue going. Uncapping tines or roller for frames that are drawn out shallowly and they're not going to exceed the edge of the frame. You can't really use the uncapping knife, so you'll need to use tines or a roller. Roller is very gentle and it just punctures each of the cappings. Takes a little bit longer to extract, but it's easier for the honeybees to repair the wax afterwards. Your uncapping tines, as long as you're really good at it, totally fine to use, minimal destruction. But if you don't know how to use your uncapping tine, you can do a lot of damage. So just be really gentle. All you really want to do is remove the wax cappings. You don't want to damage the structure of the cells when you're doing this. Good to have jars around. Any kind of jar will work, depending on if you are storing honey for yourself, storing honey to bottle later, or storing honey immediately to give out to friends and families. You might want fancy queen line jars or really fancy Muth jars. I've actually got a picture of the Muth jars here. You can use just regular old mason jars. That's what I usually turn to. Plastic bear squeeze bottles, jugs, whatever you have on hand. It's nice to have a mallet to seal your 5-gallon buckets and a bucket opener. Those things just are terrible to get off. So a bucket opener is one of my go-to things when it comes to the honey bucket. And like I said, have a standalone veil as well. So the setup, everybody's setup is slightly different. Mine is not necessarily the best. It's just what I use and what works for me. It's important to stay organized because you're doing a lot of things here. You're working basically for hours and hours. So if you've got a nice, easy setup, you just go from one station to the next. It becomes easy, mindless work. It's just a lot. So stay organized. I have 4 different stations for my uncapping area, my honey harvest area. Station 1 is just full of unprocessed super. So I've got boxes stacked up that are ready to start processing. Station 2 is uncapping, Station 3 for extracting, and Station 4 for bottling. A lot of people think this is a whole lot to do all at once. I don't blame them. Some people will get to extracting and say, I'm going to bottle in a few months. That's fine too. So make use of tables. Don't ever do it on the ground. You will murder your back. So try not to bend over as much as possible. This is my setup in a nutshell. So first station with unprocessed frames, I've just got a table full of supers. It's good to have space for at least 3 supers, but you can start stacking them too. The second station, uncapping here. So I have an uncapping tub, which is open to a honey bucket, which also has a sieve in it. So I'm extracting, or I'm uncapping all of my frames and making it so the honey is actually able to come out of the cells. And your uncapping tub with really big fat frames, say you have a 10 frame honey super, but you only put 8 frames in there, the wax is going to be coming out way off to the side of those frames, and you're going to get a lot more honey out of each of those frames, but you're also going to get a lot more honey into the uncapping tub because your big fat frames won't fit in the extractor, and you're going to have to use your knife to cut those off. So your uncapping tub on fat frames is going to be probably about 50% of your honey harvest, and the other 50% is going to be in your centrifuge. Station 3, extracting. I like to set the extractor on a pallet, and they have little holes in the feet. So I grab some bolts and I just have those on hand. Bolt it to the pallet, throw a bag of cement on the pallet. This thing bucks like crazy if you've got an uneven load on it. So you can have someone holding the bucket, you can have it weighted down, but it's going to try and wiggle all over the place when you're spinning it. Also with the extractor, this is where your second honey bucket comes in hand. So I've got a 5-gallon bucket right below the extractor. You've got to be really careful when using the extractor that you actually release the honey once in a while. If it starts to touch the frames, that slows you down and it actually wrecks the centrifuge. So if you've got probably 2 or 3 inches of honey in the bottom, make sure you release that into the bucket. Also, it takes the sieve time to filter the honey. So if you just keep it going, it moves a lot faster. And then finally, my bottling area. And this is where I cap either the extractor or the uncapping tub. And I'll move one of the buckets from underneath, pop it over here, and I'll start actually jarring the honey that I've put into the bucket.
You really need a lot of room to do this, huh?
Yep, I've got my entire garage cleaned out by the end of July just for this.
Could you do it? You probably would want to do it like in a screened-in gazebo area.
I would
Just
be a
spin
little
and
bit worried about the
spin.
screened-in gazebo because they're going to smell it, they're going to come straight to it. You're going to have just bees lined up on that screen all over the place. So it'd probably be possible, but it wouldn't be comfortable. So you might be asking, what is uncapping? I've been talking about uncapping all day. Nobody knows what it is. So you've got your cells that are coming out of the frame, kind of a tubular shape. The cap is the small wax-like disc that covers the cured honey on the frames. Uncapping, there's lots of different methods of uncapping. I've got a couple of photos down here. The one you see with the pan, that's a good way of not doing it. You see, this is an example of where you can really destroy the comb with your uncapping tines. Rather than uncapping the individual cells, the honey was moving very slowly that day, and I decided to just get rid of all the comb and give the empty frame back to the bees later. So this is just complete comb destruction. You don't need to do this on a hot day. If you've got a heater running, it's 90 degrees, you just uncap tiny little bits, and that's all you need. And then the gravity drain doesn't take very long. But I waited way too long. It was way too cold, and I did end up doing destruction on this one. The uncapping knife photo you see down here, on a great frame that's nice and deep, it'll be one smooth slice and you're done. This is a little bit shallower frame, so I'm not getting all of the caps done here. So I went through after the knife and I just uncapped the remaining cappings with my uncapping tines. So hot knife is a good tool for uncapping, but you can use a cold knife also. Uncapping tines, or they're also called scratchers. Uncapping roller, I've had some success with the roller, but it's a lot slower and I'm not super patient, so I do prefer the tines over the roller. Make sure you always uncap your frames with a catch basin. Use your uncapping tub like you see down here. Use a cookie sheet, use something, because when you uncap, you're going to release a lot of honey in that process. There is a wooden bar that you see over the uncapping tub. It has a big sharp nail sticking out of it. This doesn't really work on plastic frames, but if you are trying to uncap a wooden frame, you just kind of jam that wooden frame on there and it holds it still while you uncap it. So it's a really handy tool. Loading the extractor. So each extractor is a little bit different. Some of them load to the side, some of them load straight in line. Frames need to be loaded with proper orientation though. Most extractors, you have to do one way or the other. The Maxxon extractor that we have here, you'll see the photo down here. You want to make sure that the top bars are facing outwards. They simply don't fit otherwise. It takes a little bit of working to actually get these frames to set. Make sure they're set completely down into the metal arms, or you won't be able to spin it and you'll just hit the bar in the center. So take some extra time, make sure they fit, make sure you don't need to do any additional slicing with your uncapping knife, and make sure they are balanced. If you've got 2 empty frames and 4 full frames, it's going to throw the extractor off balance. It's going to buck all over the place even worse. So our Maxent extractor will fit 6 Western frames in this orientation you see here, or if you have deep frames, it will fit deep frames also, but you're going to have to line them side to side in this basket instead of back and forth here. And it takes a little bit longer because you do have to flip those frames back and forth.
So when you're uncapping and you have a double-sided frame, you do one side and then flip it over and do the other?
Yep, do both sides when you uncap, and then when you uncap both sides of the frame, then you load it into the extractor. The cleanup. This is the part that everybody is done with. I've got my honey, I don't want to clean up. It's difficult to clean up honey, it's difficult to clean up wax, it's even more difficult to clean up propolis, but there's a way to do it. So on a hot summer day, most of our hoses are sitting in the sun. That's great. You want to use nice hot water to rinse all of your equipment. And by the time you've rinsed all of your equipment, all the hot water will have run out of your hose. You'll be having nice cold water. And that really helps with the bleach step. So after rinsing with hot water, rinse it with cold water. And then you want to put 1 to 10 part bleach to very, very cold water. Please don't gas yourself with hot water. Use bleach and cold water solution, scrub everything, rinse again with cold water, and then allow to air dry. The uncapping area down here is a little bit difficult to reach. So I like to use a brush with the cloth on the end of it with a long stick. And that kind of helps just kind of get all the little edges in here.
Can you do that outside so it's going into the ground?
Yep. I always clean my extractor outside. It's way too much of a mess to do inside. And it's probably a good idea just to wear a veil until you're comfortable. If you've got a bunch of bees buzzing around you, get it to the point where it's clean enough that they kind of go away. But I've never really had a problem with cleaning the extractor and having
And
honeybees
you're
around.
uncapping tubs, you're doing the same thing.
Your uncapping tub, you're doing the same thing. Rinse it out with hot water, rinse it out with cold water, use your bleach solution, scrub it down, and then rinse it again with cold water and let it air dry.
And your bleach, is that a 1 to 10 solution?
Yes, 1 to 10 solution. So it's a mild bleach solution. You don't want to gas yourself even with the cold water. So you figured out how to clean your extractor, your basin. You've got all of these wet supers now, all of these frames that are empty. Honeybees are wonderful at cleaning that up, and not all of the honey will be out of there. It's almost impossible to get complete harvest out of your hive. So you throw those wet supers straight back on the hives. Make sure that there's no honey on the outsides, clean up the outsides so you don't introduce robbers, but put those wet supers and frames back on your hive and the bees will clean them up after a few days. Most of the time you don't want an extra stack of three supers on your hive over winter. That's just way too much extra room to heat. It's stuff that you don't need. It's extra frames that are going to get moldy. So after the 3 days, it's really important. After 3 days, after 4 days, they're going to start building and replacing honey in those supers. After 3 days, they've just got them cleaned up. They're ready to go. You can fumigate them again. You can bee escape them again. You can remove those supers that are now clean and put them away for storage for the year. And next up, just enjoy your honey. It takes a lot of work, but in the end, you get so much honey. It's a huge reward and it's just a lot of fun.
How much honey do you want to leave to overwinter?
Generally speaking, you want to leave about 60 to 80 pounds of honey in the hive for them to overwinter. So 2 of your brood boxes being full of about half brood and about half honey is what you want to see going into September. Some beekeepers will allow bees to have an extra honey super over winter that's completely full of honey. Some beekeepers think that's really dumb. So it depends on who you ask.
If you do that and they haven't used all that honey, can you harvest it after?
That's the tricky question. It depends on whether or not you treat for mites.
Mm.
Usually, if I leave an extra honey super on the bees for the winter time, I will allow them to start filling that super. It takes a lot of work. It's dumb, I know. Remove that super when I go to treat for mites because you really shouldn't be eating anything that you've treated. And then once I'm done with my treatment, I'll put the super back on. And then I'll treat again and I'll do the
So
same
what do you
process and then I'll leave the honey super
How
on
do you
for
store
them.
that super?
So once it's escaped, you just store the super just like you'd store it for harvest. You would make sure all the bees are gone. You would put it in your garage. If you're going to be leaving it for a week, it's not a big deal. Just throw it in the garage, leave it there, make sure that ants can't get to it. So put it up high on a stool, put a little bit of Vaseline around the legs of the stool. Nothing's going to bother it. If you are storing honey super for long term, then it's a good idea to freeze each of the frames in the honey super for about 3 days. That kills any pests that are on there and prevents wax moths and things from coming out. And then you can store it in a well-lit, well-ventilated area in the garage. We'll go over a lot of that in the wintering class as well.